Hello and welcome to Blades of Thunder. Hello and welcome to another video of Blades of Thunder. In this video I'm going to take you through the process of how I transformed my Bell 206 Jetranger fuselage from the black and yellow design, as you can see in the video flying around at the helipad scale fly-in last year, to its new colour scheme of the Drax airline from the James Bond movie Moonraker. I will take you through some photographs and some videos of how the cockpit was painted and installed, which is yet to be finished, but hopefully that will come up in some following videos, as well as the painting of the main fuselage. Just to reiterate, this is the first time that I've actually attempted painting a fuselage, so I asked for some help from my fellow Blades of Thunderers, Kev and Glen, to assist me in all the prep, etc., and what kind of paint to use. So I will take you through the process of rubbing it down and masking it up for the paint and the lines and the colour schemes, etc., and to its final maiden flight in its fuselage. So without further ado, we'll crack on and hope you enjoy the video. Thanks very much. So the first thing I looked at with this project for the Bell 206 was the interior and the cockpit. I managed to find online some files, the address of which will appear on screen now. And these included all the relevant items: the seats, the pedals, the cyclic, and cockpit instrument panel, as well as the center console. And once we worked out the correct scale, Glen printed them all off, and then they were ready for painting. Next we're going to look at the construction of the center console and the instrument panel. So the first thing I looked at painting was the instrument panel, and here we have the back of it, which I primed with grey. I primed all of them with grey primer first and then painted over the top. So this is the back of the instrument panel, and as you can see it's just a box basically. So I primed and painted the back of the box, and then I went on to the main instrument panel first. So I sanded down any little burr marks and smoothed everything out first, primed it with the grey, and as I liked the colour of the grey anyway, and on some of the reference photos the outside of the instrument panel was black, I decided to mask it up and just paint the outside of the front of the instrument panel black, as you can see here. Then I found an image of some instruments and printed them off to the right scale so they all fitted into the holes. I decided not to put any acetate in front of them. I just left them as paper, but if you wanted to, there's no reason why you couldn't put some acetate in front. And then I just sort of fixed the front of the panel to the box at the back, and that gave us the complete instrument panel, as you can see here. I also painted the emergency cover red, and a couple of the little knobs on some of the dials as well, just to add a bit of depth and artistic flair to it as well, but it's entirely up to you how you wish to paint them. And then once I'd done that, I then constructed the center console and fitted that into the nose of the aircraft to get the position correctly. And then once the center console was fitted, I then placed the main instrument panel on there and fixed it to that. So the next step then was to have a look at the landing lights. So here we're going to have a look at the fitting of the landing lights into the nose of the aircraft. As you can see on the main center console printout, it gives us two circular holes which are right in the correct place for them. So unfortunately I didn't have any holders, so Glen kindly designed some for me and printed them out so I could just pop the LEDs in there, and they just slotted in the hole perfectly. what I did was I put some foil inside of the LED holders just to add a bit more reflectiveness, to make them stand out a little more, and they certainly do, as you'll see later on in the video. So once I got those fitted in there, I had to figure out how I was going to connect them to the main lighting unit, because the nose of the aircraft, the canopy actually separates from the main fuselage. So what I did was I got a servo plug and fitted that into the back of the center console, as you see here, adding a bit more strength to it, and then I was able to attach a plug to the main lighting unit, and therefore I could just plug it in when I needed to attach it, and then unplug it when I took the canopy off the front, and it works quite well. So once I'd got all that wired in and tested and it was all working, then I looked at doing the actual instruments themselves on the center console, so all the radio stacks and things like that, and I pre-painted those as I did with the rest of the cockpit and controls. And but what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to access inside, so if I needed to replace any of the wires or any of the LEDs, I wanted to be able to open them up and actually get access inside. So I decided to put some hard foam, and then I could literally just push the radio stack panel into the top of it and then remove it as a win rather than gluing it in there, and it works pretty well. And then once I'd finished that, it was then moving on to the actual painting of the main fuselage. So before I got onto the main prep of the fuselage ready for painting, there were a couple of things I wanted to do beforehand. The first thing was to remove all the glazing out of the main canopy. So I removed all of that and cleaned up as best as I could. I had to replace the side door windows with new, as they were quite brittle and they broke as I removed them. The second thing was I wanted to put new lights in the rear horizontal stabilizers, but unfortunately they weren't easy to get off, so I had to cut them off literally with a saw. And Glen, who was my saviour on this one, I think, with the 3D printing, 3D printed me some new ones with the holes for the cabling and some brackets as well to be fixed onto the boom. Now the good thing with this was I could put them the correct way, because the original ones were put on upside down. The other thing is I could fit the brackets on and then leave the horizontal stabilizers off, so I could paint them more easily. As you can see, there was a lot of little screws on here, and it took a while for me to get them nice and horizontal, even though I knew roughly where they had to go anyway from the previous ones that were fitted. Once I'd had those done and ready, it was then down to removing them again so I could then prep the fuselage for painting. Now with all the prep done and out of the way, it was now ready to rub down the main fuselage and canopy. Now this is the first time I have attempted anything like this before on a complete respray of a canopy and fuselage, so I'm sure I'd had made some errors in the process on the way. However, after many rub downs of multiple grades of wet and dry, and given it a good thorough wash afterwards and dried, it was now ready for its first coat of primer. So over the many evenings and the odd weekend, I managed to get multiple layers of undercoat and top coats on there. At the same time, I did the skids and the struts as well as the end cap that goes on the tail. One other thing to mention was I had another vertical stabilizer printed by Glen, as the original one where the light went on the top, it had broken and there was a lot of damage as well. So I had a new one printed, and at the same time I got all that painted up and ready. So the next stage now was to mask it all up, ready for the design and the stripes for the Drax airline livery. So once the fuselage was painted and ready, it was time to add the lines. Now I've not done any lines before or any masking of this nature, so this was going to be a real big test for me. Having looked at a lot of reference photos, I saw that there were going to be two. There was going to be a black one which went around the windows and over the top and around the nose, and then there was going to be a longer gold one which went from the tail all the way down the side, under the doors, over the nose, and then repeated itself on the other side. I started off with the black one first because it was a little easier, and I masked it all up with some thin blue tape to begin with to get the nice curves, and then I masked up the rest of it and masked up the whole model and then painted it all black. I got it all off, and then I did exactly the same with the gold. This took a little bit more longer time to do, as I needed to work out the area to make sure that I had enough gold on there for the logo to sit in, etc, etc. Once I'd done all that, I masked it all up again, the whole model, and then got all the gold paint on there, and then removed all the masking ready. I then started to add the decals, which all went on, and then it was a question then of putting the lacquer on. Once I'd got all the decals on there, and I'd inspected all the lines and touched up anything that I needed to, it was now the time to put all the lacquer on and finally start bringing the painting to an end. Once that was all done, it was then a question of assembling it all up, starting with the undercarriage on there first, and then we went on to fit in the horizontal stabilizers and the lights. Now with the lights, I pre-fitted them on there, so I slid them in, made sure they all worked, and then soldered on all the extra plugs and that for the unit, and then I glued the horizontal stabilizers in there, and then I fixed the vertical stabilizer on there, feeding in the wire again, making sure it worked, and soldering on all the plugs for the controller. Once that was all completed, it was then the exciting time of putting the mechanics back in. And then once all the mechanics were all put back in and everything was put together and a quick final check, it was then on to the most exciting time of the first flight.
I say, Mr. Bond.
Yeah.
Good flight.
Good flight, all good flight.
That's really your first proper maiden with it.
That was the first proper maiden, yeah.
Yeah.
Outside, so it was all good. It was absolutely gorgeous.
It looked really nice.
So yeah, the sun's doing it justice this evening.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
Big smile, Paul. Well done.